again to Drunk Uncle Radio here on Junkdrummer TV, on the YouTube, if you can believe it, and Podcast World, and wherever else you're listening to us. Tonight, we're going to talk about a very special band. To some of us, not all of us. The suckingest band of all time. This podcast sucks. Primus. Yes, Primus. Let's begin. Why? How? Who is everybody like Primus? What is the first exposure you all had to it? Starting maybe with Mr. Junkdrummer. First time you can remember hearing the band called Primus.
Hey, baby, you don't want to deal with me. Hey, baby, you don't want to by my side. Man, it was the fucking Sailing the Sea of Cheese. So, like, that was came out in 91. I probably got turned on to it around 92, 93. I had it on cassette tape. It was the cassette tape where it had like the double cover. So you had like cover on the front and had the cover on the back that covered up the back end of the cassette tape, yo.
Yep.
And man, you know, I'd never heard anything like that ever. Like I've been listening to, you know, I'm Gen Xers. I've been listening, you know, at that point I'd listen to Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Metallica, and Megadeth, and Pantera. And it's just like, why do I like this? It makes no sense because it doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard before. Adam, like when you listen to him for the first time, what do you compare it to? There's nothing.
No, there is nothing. And I think the first track that was ever played at me, because I was like, I'd heard about Primus touring with people that I didn't liked. So I was just like, fuck
like
them.
who?
Ooh, who? Tell me it was Fish.
Yeah, like who?
It was Rush.
Yeah, it was right. Yeah. I'm talking about I wish I saw that. Was that 94?
92 and 94.
Oh, God, I wish I saw that.
Times.
So who were they touring with that you didn't like?
It was like whenever I was discovering them in the 2000s, they're probably out with like Limp Bizkit or some shit.
They were with like the Aquabats and Blink 182 and stuff like that.
So I was just
really?
like, that's fucking weird. And so, but somebody played me Tommy the Cat, and I thought what you were just quoting, like, say, baby, do you want to lay down with me? Say, baby. But I thought that whole breakdown was just like the funkiest thing I'd ever heard, and I could not stop playing it. And
it was on also, days like this that he did.
Yeah. Boom.
He cat. That was me.
That was me.
Tommy Cat is my name.
And I say unto thee.
And I say unto thee.
Well, that's also, as a bass player, it was like that was a sound. It was one of the sounds that was like, I know I can never get that because that's so much his hands. But then also like I was never, and I'm still not a good slap player, and it's not something I ever wanted to do. But you know, there are some Primus songs like, well, I got to learn that. Go ahead.
They are the Jocko for the dispossessed freaks. Like that, like when I was growing up, like the jazz fusion guys knew how to play Donna Lee, but like the weirdos that you like to, you know, hang out and, you know, in the back of the school, maybe like partake in some adult sage. They were working on a Tommy the Cat. You know what I mean?
My name is Mud.
Oh, God.
I think so that was the first one. I think it was either Jerry was a race car driver or My Name is Mud. Those two were sort of floating around my orbit about the same time. I was hanging out with Ryan Kennedy. Shout out to the Bean. If you're watching, which you're not because you're definitely just playing guitar where you don't do anything else, and I love it.
Practicing West Montgomery right now.
There is a reason that he is orders of magnitude better than all of us combined at guitar, and it's because he plays it nonstop. It's amazing. But yeah, he had that in our circles around that time, and I, being the bass player sort of standing in the shadow behind the Charleston Ryan Kennedy phenomenon, was like, well, I'm trying to learn how to play this shit. That's fucking cool bass playing. I've never heard anybody do that. So, and then many hours were spent fruitlessly hammering away going, okay, so I just don't have any idea how he's doing that.
How do these notes exist on this instrument?
You know, you see a music video on TV, and you like they only showed one or two cuts of his hands in an entire 3-minute song. Like, come on, we're trying here.
Jimmy, what was your first exposure to Primus?
First one I can very distinctly remember is the music video for "My Name Is Mud" when I was a kid, because I just remember, like the weird tall guy just like keep leaning into the camera and he's got to fucking dip in and common spat. I remember that video.
Do you think he dips in real life?
Maybe did. That would
He's
be like
redneck enough, right?
That's like redneck California.
He likes
like
to fish a lot, and that's a big fish.
Yeah, I think he might.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a regular dude. He's a dude, So I would imagine maybe, or at least maybe on the surface level, one of them surface level dippers,
So were you a bass player by the time you heard?
No, not at all. I mean, I'd be like playing like guitar and then even like weird shit like a little cornet or something like that. Like, I'd a little banjo or something. I played around in a lot of things, but not bass.
I just pictured you walking around like fucking Chuck Mangione.
I keep seeing
Jimmy, God damn it!
I keep seeing this fucking little blue pocket trumpet on Craigslist, and I swear to God, one of these days I'm going to buy it to make Jimmy play it on this show.
Oh, for sure, because he'll be able to.
Don't buy those things. The back pressure is so bad on those things; they're not worth buying. You waste money. Oh, okay. You can get like an actual real trumpet for less.
Worse money on less.
Way to fucking ruin my fucking whole thing, man.
Yeah,
if you want to be Miles Davis, get like a blue regular trumpet.
I got my bass down here because
have you got your bass there, Adam?
I wanted to shut up. Nobody like the people, the audio side, like people listening, not on YouTube, are gonna be like, "What the fuck's he talking about?"
Hey, he's got a bass.
But part of my first introduction to Primus was everybody like at lunch or whatever who was a bass player would always come and sit down with like their Ibanez rig like we all had, but they would be like, "I play Lacquer Head," and I'd be like, "Okay, what's that?" And I didn't know it, but they like dude would like get his shit out and he'd like put that weird thumb out like everybody did back then, and they'd be like.
Yeah. They do that.
Like, that's not.
They do that thing where their thumbs like way down here for some reason.
Yeah,
they're like hitting it like that. No, the first Primus record that I can remember, my cousin Anthony, who was like way into really cool like alt rock and like metal and all kinds of stuff. He got me Tales from the Punch Bowl not long after it came out. It was like Christmas 95 or 96, I guess. So it either would have been the year it came out or the year after it came out. He got me that record, and that was the first record I remember listening to like front to back. I mean, I was like 10 years old listening to this really
Dude,
weird
you're listening
record.
to Southbound Pachyderm at 10.
Oh yeah, Mrs. Blaylene, just like weird stuff. But then it's like, I have to take a step back, and then I have to realize, there's probably a segment of people, I don't know how many, on the Junkdrummer TV network, but there has to be a segment of people, and when we say Primus, they have no idea who in the hell we're talking about. So let's take a step back, pretend like these people have no idea who Primus is. Primus is a band formed about 1984-ish.
Is it that far ago?
That far ago.
Really?
But they weren't Primus.
Dude, Suck on This came out in 89.
It did. Yeah. It did. They were from El Sobrante, California, formed about 84, and it was originally Les Claypool, who's the bass player, vocalist, kind of the main catalyst of the whole thing, Todd Huth, and a Lindrum. Electronic drum.
God,
machine.
I would pay to see that right now. That'd be amazing.
It was probably pretty cool, and they were called Primate. They weren't called Primus. They were called Primate, and that lasted like a couple of months because they did a demo, and a band called the Primates was like threatening to sue them because this was still the 80s.
Right.
90s, and just even if you were like an indie band with no money to fund that demo, Les Claypool sold his car for this band, and they still got like threatened to be sued. Like they were like a nobody band, and a lawsuit just came out of nowhere. It was the 80s. So they changed the name to Primus like a month after that, and then they had another drummer come in. His name is Peter Libby. He leaves. Eventually, like they get to be kind of big in the Berkeley Square scene, San Francisco, that kind of area, like central northern Cali. They get real big. And then Jay Lane comes in. And I took all these notes, and who was Jay Lane playing with? The Freaky Executives is who he was playing with at the time. He comes in, and they do another demo called Sausage, and then comes 89.
Whoa, is that why Sausage was a thing later?
Yes, and we'll get into that. But then comes 1989. Primus had kind of cultivated this weird, funky metal, like Frank Zappa meets Chili Peppers meets something kind of thing. Like this meets Captain Beefheart kind of like weirdness. And they do this live record called Suck on This, which is 2 shows combined, these 2 Berkeley Square shows, which they were doing a lot. They combined 2 of these shows. Les's dad had given them a loan to put this demo out, or put that record out, like for that. And it gets seen and heard by Interscope Records. And Interscope picks them up off of that, and they do Fristle Fry, which was that first studio record. And it had, yeah, I mean, well,
John the Fisherman,
exactly,
Any Puppies,
exactly, John, yeah, but they kind of came in at like a weird time. Like if you've never heard Primus is this weird.
I mean, you explain, Jimmy. Go ahead. Explain Primus to someone who's never heard them before.
I can't, and the only way I can do it is to like. There's a Wikipedia section on Primus called "Musical Style, Legacy, and Influences," and it's as chaotic as you can imagine. I'll just read it verbatim because it's Wikipedia. Unlike other bands associated with the 1990s alternative music movement, Primus emerged from a mostly heavy metal background with Claypool and Larry Lalonde. Lur, who's the guitarist that came in later on he came on to Suck on This stuff. Like that was Herb Alexander and Lur. That's like inside stuff nobody really cares about. But previously a part of the 1980s Californian thrash metal underground. Kirk Hammett, guitarist of Bay Area thrash metal band, who was a high school classmate of Les Claypool, remarked in a 1991 interview that Primus are, quote, unique. They're a square peg in a round hole. The music of Primus has been described as, quote, thrash funk meets Don Knotts Jr. and quote, the Freak Brothers set to music. Also, Primus has been categorized as alternative rock, alternative metal, experimental rock, funk metal, progressive rock, and thrash funk. Yeah, regarding the band's genre, Claypool stated in 1991, we've been lumped in with the funk metal thing just about everywhere. I guess people just have to categorize you. MTV suggests that Primus is a, quote, post-punk rush spiked with the sensibility and humor of Frank Zappa. Les Claypool himself once described their music as psychedelic polka. Spin have labeled Primus as pranksters, and in 1995 as an, quote, unlikely gold-selling white trash purveyor of hard-ass pinballing funk metal.
That's the best one. That's the one. If you were going to do it, that's the one that you say.
Primus is the only band.
Can you pause? Can you run that last one back there one more time? For diction, that was great.
Spin have labeled Primus as pranksters, and in 1995 as an, quote, unlikely gold-selling white trash purveyor of hard-ass pinballing funk metal. With 2 citations. Since they do Chicago style here. Primus is the only band with its own ID3 genre tag, Primus, as introduced by Winamp. Primus's influences include King Crimson, The Residents, heavily, Rush, Pink Floyd, and Hillel Slovak era Red Hot Chili Peppers. That's the original guitarist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, for those that don't know. Notably, Claypool has lifted much of his vocal and music style from The Residents. Much.
And Captain Beefheart.
Yes, and Captain Beefheart and a little bit of Getty. The band have been credited as an influence to the nu metal genre with bands such as the Deftones, Korn, Limp Bizkit, Incubus, Pressure 4 or 5, and
all those bands fucking wish they were proud.
No shit.
Exactly. We'd get into that, but it's also like the question begs: a band like Primus, how and why, right? And it would be hard without without playing music, and I know that's difficult, but it's like a band that unique and that strange, and why, how, and what circumstances led to them being the success they were, because they were a legitimate multi-time top 10
and platinum and gold selling. Maybe not platinum, but definitely gold.
And this ain't just like the alternative charts. This is the Billboard Top 200. They were top 10 twice. Top 20 four times.
Seas of Cheese has to be platinum by now, right?
Probably by now, I would guess. Probably
right.
So.
Okay, so my answer to that would be a quote from one of their heroes, which would be Frank Zappa. And Frank Zappa said back in the day, before record companies became very corporate, you would just have, some big, fat cigar smoking guy behind the table, behind the desk, and be like, I don't know what it is. Put it out. Let's see.
Right.
And that's probably the only way that could have happened, because there's no A&R office in the world that was like, let's put a chalkboard up and let's write out the band that we're going to make all this money with. And they would, and which is why the business is fucked up. They would have never came up with like, let's get a death metal guitarist, Larry Lalonde, who's played with Possessed, and he's going to make
an
noises.
Auctioneer on vocals.
Yeah. And an auctioneer.
This weird, real tall, skinny, lanky, doofusy looking
there's
guy.
No sex appeal. There's no reason that Jerry Was a Race Car Driver is a hit. That's a hit song. That's a fucking hit song.
Yeah. I mean, it's fucking catchy though, isn't it? Think of it. As soon as you hear that riff, what the fuck is that?
It's great.
What the fuck is that? Yeah.
That's one of those other first songs that really pulled me in. It was like you hear like the verse and that cool tap thing he's doing, but then in the chorus, go, that double boom, that shit is heavy, and I love that so much.
I'd say I mean, I don't know if I could explain it, but it's like, I mean, there have always been like these avant-garde bands. The Residents, like one of Les's big influences, they were an avant-garde band.
But the people who are watching this, anyone that's listening or watching this, 3 people might know the Residents.
That's not mainstream success. Like Peter Gabriel gets weird, early Genesis stuff like that. It gets weird.
Yeah.
But to me, I kind of wonder, like, okay, so Suck on This comes out 89, Seas of Cheese comes out 91, Pork Soda comes out 93, and that's a top 10 hit. So, Frizzle Fry comes out in 90, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you're coming out of the 80s, you're coming out of this day-glow kind of pop era where everything is, hair metal, everything is big, bright pop hits, everything is big, bright. And then now you're starting to get this grungy answer to it. And you're also getting it in other mediums as well. I mean, you're getting like Tim Burton, right? Tim Burton's making Batman. Tim Burton's making Beetlejuice. You're getting these weird movies that are coming into the mainstream that are introduced. Edward Scissorhands. You're getting these like kind of ideas that would have been like an indie movie maybe just a few years prior, and now they're huge, big budget productions with big budget ideals. And I think like Primus is like the Tim Burton of rock and roll. They're this like weird, strange kind of like noodly thing that just kind of fits in, and it worked, and nobody knows why it worked. And I think it's because at everybody's heart, everybody's weird. It's like a lot of people like to say things like, well, I don't like anime, but then at night, they go and they'll watch like some kind of they'll watch
Cowboy Bebop.
Well, they'll watch Cowboy Bebop, or they'll watch My Neighbor Totoro, or they'll watch, if they're sad, Grave of the Fireflies, or something like that.
Oh God.
Yeah, they'll get
Christ.
They'll watch Studio Ghibli, they know it, but they don't admit that they know it. And Primus, I think, is kind of one of those bands. Like they'll listen to, and not everybody does, and not everybody should. And I think one of the great things about Primus is they don't give a shit if you like it or not. But it's like, you like it and you don't know why you do, and that why you should, but you just do. It's weird and not really like artsy necessarily, but it's also
It's
not
definitely artsy.
It is artsy, but it's not
on
pretentious.
purpose. Yeah, there you go. It's not on purpose. It's artsy just by existing.
It's not a pretentious art, and they're guys that they can do other things. They're talented people. Like when they did 2 cover records, Miscellaneous Debris and Rhinoplasty. Both those records are all covers, like, you know, Peter Gabriel, Stanley Clarke, Jerry Reed, Ecstasy, another one of their big influences. And they do all these different covers, and they do them all pretty damn well, you know, and which is not something that a lot of other bands can pull off. Not
like Fish.
I wasn't going to say it out loud, but I'll let the Fish fans say it out loud for me.
But wait, we're going to have to talk about Oysterhead.
We will have to talk
about the other things too.
We will.
It took Les Claypool to make Trey cool.
Well, I don't know if it was.
To make Trey cool. The drummer for Green Day.
I see what I did there.
Okay, so y'all are all bass players, and you hear that, and no other bass player sounds like that. Like, there was one night, like, I was down a Primus hole, and I just wanted to find out, like, where did Les get? How did he get there? Like, what his styles? Like, who are the people? Because, man, nobody as a bass player sounds like him. And Jimmy, you were the one that told me that, like, Stanley Clarke gave him the down this fucking thing.
The way he strokes, I mean, he does a little bit of the Geddy Lee, but the way he strokes is very Stanley Clarke. Because the Stanley Clarke style is, like, I would call it even more aggressive than Geddy Lee's style. Like, Stanley Clarke is a big dude with big giant hands, and he hits the shit out of his bass whenever he strums. And when Les does it, it's very downstrokey, like hard hitting. And I think it's almost more Stanley Clarke than it is Geddy. There's definitely Geddy Lee.
Well, you know, I've always thought that Les's like standard finger playing, that's what he took from Geddy.
Oh yeah, he pulls real hard.
Yeah, but like Geddy actually credits Les to inspiring him to start that whole like kind of stuff, because that's how he had that super fucking crazy attack, you know. And Geddy always liked Les's rhythmic style of playing, which was a lot of the slap stuff, and Geddy doesn't slap, so that's
the 3-finger thing too is what Les got from Stanley Clarke. Shoot, I'm trying to remember which song it was, but Les does a lot of the, you know, like better, the triplets. He does a lot of triplets, and he can do them really, really well for a really, you know, yeah, he'll do it for hours, and that's a Stanley Clarke thing. Stanley Clarke is a big triplet guy. The way
where did his slap part, like his slap influence come from?
I think that's Larry Graham and Louis Johnson is who I think it is, because that's who it's most like. Larry Graham hits the shit out of the bass, and Louis Johnson always hit the shit out of the bass, and Les always hits them pretty good, you know. And he's got a quick thumb, so I think it's a combination of those, and he's credited both those guys as big influences. I mean, I'm not talking to him, I don't know, you know. I could be talking on my ass, and I'm totally.
But I'm saying, with you being aware of a lot of, you know, phenomenal bass technicians, you would be a decent person to ask.
I would guess that.
Where that would.
And what's his name? Otis Redding's son, the bass player. That's the big slappy bass solo that Les always used to play. The Awakening, I think, is what it's called. But that was Otis Redding's son. He did that. He was a really, really good bass player.
Who did Otis Redding's son play for?
See, and that's when I can't remember. I don't know if it was like he played for the Isley Brothers for a little while or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. But that's the guy who did the solo, and Les did that solo a lot.
Is it that one that he plays? It's like the boo doo doo.
Yeah.
Okay, he played that when we saw him.
Yeah, The Awakening. Yeah, it's one of Otis Redding's sons. But I mean, a lot of different guys and a lot of different influences, but then also like a band, you know, like some of the other guys we were talking about. It's not all bass stuff. Some of it's sounds and drum stuff. You know, a lot of the left hand stuff. You know, that sound. It's not necessarily bass at all. It's just sounds that he would hear in his head, and I think bass is the vehicle by which he made those things happen because that's
man,
what he had to work with.
So I did a video on Tim playing at like a clinic doing Jerry Was a Race Car Driver.
Mm-hmm.
Please go check that out. And I said that the man Les is a beast to play with because he plays bass, he plays drums, but he also plays guitar at the same time. Mm-hmm. And because he takes up all of that, Lair lives in this like sonic in the atmosphere, a psychedelic acid sound. Mm-hmm. And depending on the drummer, there's a couple different ways as a drummer to deal with that. Like Herb got inside of it and played tennis with Les and like played with and at him. But Brain, especially on the Brown album, just was like, I'm gonna get out of the way. I'm just gonna lay down funk, and then you can just do your, handball, playing handball with God on top of it. Mm-hmm. Now during Anti-Pop, Brain started playing more like Herb did, and we can get into that later.
That's part of why I love Anti-Pop so much.
I love Anti-Pop. I think can we agree that if you think it was someone says Primus, who's the drummer you think of?
Herb Alexander.
Right? Everyone thinks Herb. And obviously, but man, Brain's contribution is not appreciated enough because Herb is so big, because Herb is such a, he's a more virtuoso player, but Brain being more of a feel player too.
One of my favorite songs of that era is Shake Hands with Beef. And the drum sound on that is so just, he's beating the fuck out of him.
Fucking great. It's one of my favorite Primus songs.
There's no question that that album is by far sonically the best. It just, the rest of them, and you can feel that they've like embraced a little bit of the big label polish. There's a bunch of guests on it from other very large bands at the time. They've gotten to be pretty big in their own right, and it just, everything's so much thicker and richer and more smashed and more in your face. Whereas I feel like so many of the first records, and probably on purpose, Claypool's bass just doesn't have any low end content, or the whole record as a whole are just thin, and it's just kind of, it's like that thing Dave Grohl says, if this record's made to be turned up loud, and so you can crank it up and not blow your speakers apart with low end stuff like that. But man, that the one in the, which one are we talking about? Damn it,
Brown album.
No, the one after that.
Anti-Pop.
That is the record. It is by far sonically the best. It's just rich and compressed.
Well, it's probably because Fred Durst is on it.
He produced Lacquer Head, and there's a lot of people on it, like Kirk Hammett's on, James Hetfield's on it.
Yep.
Yeah. Tom Morello's on it. Fred Durst is on it. Stuart Copeland's on it.
That's my favorite Primus record. Electric Uncle Sam is one of my favorite Primus songs.
Dude, that's a good one.
And I used to cover it years ago.
Play it. You have a bass in your hand.
I mean, it's probably the easiest fucking one. That's probably why I like it.
But yeah, like that's the thing about Les. We got to make sure, because look, we got 3 bass players in here, and we have 3.5 Primus fanatics, and it's really easy to talk about Les because he's like Les, right? We got to talk about the other players. Like, I'll remember reading a Jazz Times or a Jazz Is magazine when I was in college, and it was John Scofield, and John Scofield said, the only 2 people that I think that are really playing guitar right now. And it was right when Charlie Hunter was hitting, right? And he was like, Charlie Hunter and Larry Lalonde. And I was like, really? Like, I was obviously at that point, like a 5-6 year Primus fan, but I would never think that John Scofield would be such a Lair fan. But Lair, as much as you can say that Les doesn't play like anybody else, but you can nail his influences. Who the fuck plays guitar like Larry Lalonde? It's insane.
Nobody.
Really nobody. Maybe like Tom Morello is about the closest you could think of, and it's still not even. They kind of do the same kind of ish, but in different ways.
The wacky noisemaker thing, yeah.
But
wacky noise-
Morello is so much more rhythmic about it.
Yeah, and Lalonde's way more melodic about it.
Well, and in Rage,
It's got to be colorful.
there's not Les Claypool in Range, so there's room for Tom to write riffs. If you put Les Claypool in that band, he might have sounded like Lair.
So Tom Morello is one of the best riff writers, I think.
Yeah, he is.
Oh, yeah, great riff
he
writer.
is. But like, if I'm thinking of like a Lair riff, I can only like he doesn't really play a whole.
It's the sound. It's like wah-no,
Yeah.
wah-no.
Yeah.
It's the sound. He's the support. Like it's one of those bands where the bass sort of takes the lead in directing where the song's gonna go and the sensibility of the whole thing, and the guitar is the support. And he did that role so well, whereas a lot of guys probably couldn't have done it.
Well, you could replace Herb and you could replace Brain, and like we can talk about Jay, but you can't replace Lair in that band because who else is going to come in there as a guitar player and fill that?
Not do the same thing.
Some of the best guitar player buddies I've ever had in my life will cover any guitar player except him. Because
what do you do? How do you do it? It's black magic. His guitar playing, describing his guitar playing is like trying to get an engineer to describe mastering.
Well,
It's the same shit. It's just like it's just black
I don't
magic.
know. It's
They
just
do that-
fucking sorcery.
They do that thing where they're like, well, it's just like shitty, and you just like you have to play like
Fuck off,
It's like,
because he does it perfectly live.
Yeah, it's like okay, you do it.
Yeah,
If
go
it's
ahead
so shitty,
and
you do it.
reproduce it and reproduce it every
Show
night.
me what it does. Like, I don't know what he does. I was like, okay, well then,
Yeah.
what are you talking about?
I can speak from experience as the guitar player in the video that we are going to show the viewing public that even on his more simple songs, it is really fucking hard to ape him.
Yes, it's impossible. You have
Let's
the
do it.
hardest job. Tell him, Jimmy.
I was gonna say, let's do it right now. Hell with him. What we have right now.
piss on him.
Best song. What we have right now. We were talking about the album Anapop, and one of the big title tracks off that record was this song. This one had the music video that got MTV awfully angry.
Oh, yes.
It was talking about drugs. It was talking about Vice. Talking about hard times, Ric Flair. is what it was talking about. And now we're going to do it. We're going to tell you all about hard times, about a little bit of Vice. We're going to do that Lacquer Head, Primus, Antipop, 1999, 2000. It's up that ish. And now we is up that ish. Here it comes. Primus.
Sometimes bored and sometimes lonely, pimple-faced and rather homely. He wasn't much for socializing, the TV kept him mesmerizing. In one ear and out the other, picked up a trick from his older brother. Got him a can of slipping sauce in this minor bar across. Lacquer Head knows but one desire. Lacquer Head sets his skull on fire. Lacquer Head knows no in-betweens. Hopping on bags of gasoline. Pace since the 7th grade. She was high on gin and Gatorade. On turpentine, she lost her luck, fell in front of a spin pickup truck. He was a boy of soft demeanor, and he loved his carburetor cleaner. The vapor made a sweet aroma, sniffed himself into a coma. till your brain goes pop. Keep it stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep on stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep it stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep on stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep it stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep on stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep it stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep on stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep it stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep on stiff until your brain goes pop. Keep it stiff until your brain goes pop. Lacquer Head knows but one desire. Lacquer Head sets his skin on fire. Lacquer Head knows no in-betweens. Offer our backs of gasoline.
There it was, ladies and gentlemen. Lacquer Head, the vice that feels and sounds so nice. From Slate Dump, the best band that never was.
Featuring
but
Jimmy
is.
on the Yam Yam.
Yes, a little bit of Yam Yam, or maybe PV. Who knows? They're both red. You won't know unless you know what you're looking at. If you see the super ferrite, it was the PV. What I wanted to talk about next was kind of like how big Primus actually was, and maybe like nobody even realized it at the time unless you were paying attention. I mean, I was young when they were kind of in their big heyday. I was kind of like a latecomer to Primus. Steve and John would have been more,
way before you for sure.
yeah, in that time. But I was thinking about it like, so Seas of Cheese 91, right? They toured with Rush, Anthrax, Public Enemy, U2, and Fishbone. That's big. Pork Soda, they're headlining. 93, they headlined Lollapalooza. They're a headlining band on Lollapalooza when Lollapalooza was Lollapalooza.
Meant something. It meant something, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they were one of the big acts on Woodstock 94. That's the famous My Name is Mud, Fling in the Mud show.
That didn't work out for Green Day either, because they were like,
It did not.
don't throw mud at us. Like, oh, Billy.
Is that the show that Mike Dirnt had to swing his bass at somebody? Was that Woodstock 94? Yeah. There was one big one that stands out to me. Anyways, go on.
It was also around.
Knock somebody out.
Some of them are heavy. My Antigua was awful heavy. I could have probably killed somebody with that thing. And around that time also, Primus, Les Claypool reunites with Todd Huth and Jay Lane, which we talked about earlier with the Sausage demo, reunites to bring it back around, and they form the band Sausage and do that record Riddles Are Abound Tonight, the video for which the Riddles Are Abound Tonight are guys with blue hoods on like stationary bikes and stuff. And when Beavis and Butthead watch that video, that's where Great Cornholio comes from. He's like, he puts his shirt up and he starts going, I'm the Great Cornholio. if you're someone our age, you know.
Oh God, yeah.
You know all about,
from.
every.
I did not either.
I did not know that.
And I've seen that episode, but I don't remember that. I'll have to go look up. That's hilarious.
Shit.
It was
so when that was happening, was Herb playing with the Blue Man Group then?
No, he left. That was he left after Tales from the Punch Bowl. Okay. Because Tales from the Punch Bowl was like Winona's Big Brown Beaver, which was a huge music video. The one where they dressed like the Duracell battery guys. That was a big music video. That one they were back on. They went back on Letterman. They went back on. I mean, they'd been on like TV stuff and movie
Conan.
stuff.
They were always on Conan because Conan was a huge.
Conan was
fan.
a huge Primus fan, so they were always on Conan, and they'd been on like movies.
Good taste, man.
He's a musician.
Conan always had fish on there too, right?
Yeah.
Conan's a big fish fan, so.
Well,
I mean,
yeah, he
I'm
would.
just saying. Hashtag just saying.
Is there smoke coming out of his in ears?
Northeastern Harvard guy.
It's
Of course,
true.
he'd be a fish fan.
Damn coastal elites.
Yeah, that's what they all are. And then he always had them on there. They were on Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. They're playing Tommy the Cat on that.
Wow.
And then, but yeah, fast forward, Tales from the Punch Bowl '95, one is Big Brown Beaver. They're going back they're doing a bunch of these talk shows. And then it's right after that Tim Alexander, the drummer, leaves, and Brian Mantia, Brain comes in.
Does anyone know why?
Why he left?
Yeah.
He just, I mean, with everything I've looked at and everything I've read over the years, it was just, he kind of just fizzled out and just didn't want to do it anymore.
He fried out.
Yeah, Les called it a marriage that just kind of slowly ended.
Okay.
You know, he just sort of
Fair enough.
faded away, just didn't want to do it anymore, kind of got burnt out on it. But then comes 1996, right? And Les does his first solo record. It was the Les Claypool and the Holy Mackerel. They did that record, Highball with the Devil.
Oh, yeah.
And then 96 also is when they recorded the South Park theme. So that's when Primus does the South Park theme. Which
Man,
is
how
now,
many kids?
I fucking forgot. Oh my God, it's the.
What are you don't what?
I did.
gonna have
Oh my God.
Fucking kidding me?
No, not at all.
That might
Holy
be
shit.
But
Dude, that might be Les's biggest contribution to.
a whamola.
Oh, are you kidding me? That's like, and he's recorded a couple different versions since then.
Mm-hmm.
Because the new one
I love
with
come on down to Integrity Farms.
Integrity Farms, yeah. Oh man, that might be like, man, Jimmy, you're laying it out really beautifully. That they have influenced the culture without culture. No, John Cavendish didn't fucking remember.
They've influenced.
Did the South Park thing.
Look,
They've
it's
done
exactly.
it.
Growing up in the 90s, I'm so just desensitized to Les Claypool's voice that didn't even register. And don't get me wrong, I knew at one point in time, obviously, that
Right.
Les Claypool did the South Park, that it's Primus, but like, wow, that was definitely a moment.
They influenced
Speaking-
culture without the fucking culture even recognizing.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of Les Claypool's voice, which is not what we would call a sonorous Irish tenor. he eventually, once Primus sort of takes a hiatus and he moves on and starts doing other things, he kind of gets into the jam band scene, right? Which is sort of a natural progression for a band like that, especially at that time. Like the jam band thing was kind of like, you know, in a good spot.
Yeah, the dead quit and everything sort of blew up.
Well,
Yeah.
there was just festivals and money to be made.
Yeah,
That's
you
what I
can
mean,
make
yeah.
a lot of money in that spot. And Les just sort of migrates into that sort of thing. And he forms the band Oysterhead with Trey Anastasio from Fish and
Crimson
Stuart
Dago.
Copeland and Stuart Copeland from The Police. And makes what's probably the greatest band Trey Anastasio has ever been a part of. and Les is the lead singer in that band.
Oh, it's so good.
It's intriguing.
It's so good, man. Parker,
But it's Oysterhead's so good. I love Oysterhead.
our mutual friend Parker was at the very first show they played. He was at their first show and like maybe their fourth or fifth show because their first show was at Bonnaroo. And they hadn't recorded yet. And then him and, if you remember, the General, they went down to New Orleans and went on a fucking like boat. And Oysterhead played on like a casino boat and shit. And like they were working out all these tunes at that time. And the beginning of the Oysterhead record with Stuart Copeland playing all those paradiddles between the fucking ride cymbal and the snare drum. It's one of the all-time greatest beginnings of a record ever.
The army's
You know what I mean?
on ecstasy.
So they say.
Read all about it in USA Today.
It's so good.
But he
and
does-
you're right. You were right. Like we have in our thread that one day we'll open up to high dollar Patreon members, but you're gonna have to spend a lot of money for that shit. Jimmy was like, well, the best band that Trey was ever in, he didn't sing in. So that tells you how good of a singer he is because Les was the lead singer.
Yeah, and Les was the lead singer.
So, Jimmy and Adam, you've seen them. You've got to see them, right?
Yeah, we went and saw Les together actually in
It was just Les. It
Louisville.
wasn't Primus.
Yeah.
It was the Les.
Was it
Claypool
the
fucking-
Psychotronic or whatever that tour was called?
It was the Not Frog Brigade, whatever that was.
Bucket of Bernie Brains?
Yeah, but without Bernie Worrell
Yeah.
or Buckethead.
So you didn't see okay, because I've seen the Brigade before, so no one here has seen Primus.
It was just billed as Les Claypool.
Yeah,
But it was Brain and Buckethead.
It wasn't Brain. It was Jay Lane.
Man, let's talk about that. Like, I'm gonna post this on the Primus Facebook page that I'm on. I love Herb. I love Brain. I have no feelings for Jay Lane. I don't think he's good. I don't think he's bad. Is that bad? Because I saw
you nothing him.
I nothing him because I saw the Brigade, and it was like Mike Dillon. It was Enor, who Les described as the only living human redwood tree, because he's like fucking 6'10". He's this gigantic.
That's a very Les Claypool thing to call someone.
It is. And fucking Mike Dillon on vibraphone. He's phenomenal. Jay Lane was there, and I was like, eh. But the one time that I did really like, I love because that live at what is it called? Live at Purple. What's it called?
Oh, I can see the album, like the Purple Onion thing. I can see
Live at the Purple Onion.
Yeah,
that's
Live
it.
at the
Yeah,
Purple
the Live at the Purple Onion record's phenomenal.
Oh, it's great.
But then at the show I was at, it was called the Mid-Atlantic Experience in Lewisburg, and then they brought out.
Believe in the
Believe. No, he brought her out. They brought out Gabby Lala. And I was like, why is this happening? Why are you doing this, Les? Why are you doing this to me? I came here to see you.
I like Jay Lane and like when he'd be doing like the stuff with Rat Dog. I thought he was like it suited him there. He's good for that style, like with Bob Weir and those guys. It suits that, but I felt like whenever he was with Les, the sausage stuff, like Riddles Are Bound Tonight and all that, I thought was
that's a cool rat. It's cool. It's
he's a big dude, you know. He plays differently than Brain and Herb do, but
yeah,
I personally prefer Tim and Mantia to Jay Lane just with how they interact with Les. My personal preference is that I didn't like the way Jay Lane interacted with Les quite as much.
That's my thing, man. He
doesn't dance with Les the same way. You know?
He doesn't. He doesn't either lay it down and let Les play, or he doesn't play tennis with him like Herb does. It's this, yeah. I'm going to get a lot of shit for that being a drum channel, just being like, I feel nothing for Jay Lane.
You sound frustrated. You should take a breath.
Man, I just don't get it. Mike Dillon is my third favorite percussionist that would ever play with Les. Cause man, he's something, man. Like
I think he was at that show we went to playing vibraphone.
Yeah, he's on that Willy.
Wow.
He was on that weird Willy Wonka record too.
Yeah,
he's all over that. That stuff's great. I love that Willy.
Dude,
Wonka
if that record would have came out when they did the Johnny Depp shit, it would have been an even better movie. The movie was good, but it would have been better if it would have been.
It suits it so much better.
It is, yeah.
It's just that weird tongue-in-cheek strangeness that just. Well, I guess that sort of personifies Primus is the weird.
But see, I don't think it's tongue-in-cheek. I think it's just like normal. For them, it's just that's their norm.
Yeah,
it's to be that.
But I guess that's another point about Primus is like they're one of those bands where they're artistic, they're strange, but they're not pretentious, and they just don't care. Like if you don't like them, and the fans are the same way. If you don't like them, they just don't give a shit. They're like, good, that's great.
Yeah,
we hope you don't.
Yeah,
Primus
you
sucks.
don't. They say you don't suck.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
you don't suck.
You don't suck. Jimmy,
they suck so good.
Adam, you're gonna have to put that meme right here. The meme of Tool fans explaining Tool in their overly purple prose, pretentious way. One side of the meme is, Tool decides to break down the barriers between reality and imagination and blah, blah, blah. And then Primus fans like, they suck. They suck.
Got to put up that one too, where it's like it's where they're telling the Fish fan that Fish sucks and they're crying, and then they do Primus sucks and there's like high fiving.
Adam Jones, if there was one Primus song that you could play, and that like the ability to play that song would help you down the road, what would be that one Primus song?
Oh, well, I mean, help me down the road. I don't know. I think the one that I always wanted to play the most and was just like, can't do it, was Tommy the Cat.
That's the one, man.
That's the one. And I've never been good at tapping. So like something like Jerry's a Race Car Driver, I've just never been able to do. So there's nothing about Les's like big hits, like the big hit songs that every bass player is like, oh, I gotta, there's none of those really that I would say is like, if I learned that, like I could maybe start being a session guy again or something like that.
Could you imagine, Jimmy? You do more sessions than anybody. This is like why Primus is so unique and amazing. Like, Jimmy, how many sessions have you been in where you just like show up and like, here's the song, and you just like start playing like a Les Claypool song or like a Les Claypool version, and like, Jimmy, thank you, but we'll call you. We'll call you if we need you.
Yeah, that
Jimmy, this song is called "Beer Never Broke My Heart."
We're really looking for a little bit of a like a chorused delayed 2-hand tap.
Yeah, like,
can you do that? Can you hit it with an envelope filter and smack it?
Do you have a tremolo installed on your bass?
You have a collar.
With two G strings and 2 D strings. Could you possibly do this?
Yeah, no, you don't get that.
Which is why Primus makes no sense. It's killing me.
At the base
try
of
to
it,
describe it.
At the core of it, like, what band is more punk rock than Primus?
Because they've never give a shit.
They don't
about
give a
what's
shit
popular.
about anybody, and they don't give a shit about nobody, and they still succeed.
Because they were like in the beginning, they were, like you said earlier, they were popular during like hair band shit. Then they were popular during grunge, and then what we haven't talked about yet is they were still popular and at the height of their popularity during the new metal phase. And the problem with that was now that we talked about that during the break, was maybe they were so popular because the bands that were really popular were all influenced by Primus.
Well, and then collaborating by that time. Like, I mean, you start seeing these bands like Korn, Limp Bizkit,
311.
311, Mudvayne, Deftones,
Incubus.
You start seeing all these, many, many more other than that. You start seeing these new metal, what they were called at the time, as we recall it, new, it's spelled N-U, new metal.
I think usually with an umlaut.
Yeah, with an umlaut.
Jinx.
They were, that was the thing of the time, and they were gigantic. And so here comes, 1999-ish, the Anti-Pop records getting made. And so Primus, now Fred Durst is working on that record, and you're starting to see these guys that were influenced by that whole thing, collaborating with them and like making artistic suggestions and all these sorts of things. So they sort of play into it a little bit. They detune the guitars. They have this sort of new metal sound on the record, which makes it more polished and more pop sounding and more accessible to a lot of people. It's probably the most accessible people to most. I would say like you're not going to get a lot of, you're not going to like play Frizzle Fry at most people. And
Well-
they're going to be like, well, that's I don't know what happened to me. Just
I mean,
I feel violated strangely.
I was talking to you guys in the chat earlier. It was like their big song. Like they went to all of the late night TV outlets, like the shows. It was Jay Leno and Letterman, whatever.
they're on the big
But-
tours too, like Ozfest and Family Values and all that stuff.
Yeah,
they were
but
on all
like
those.
Oh
Um,
shit, they were on the family. Oh, Korn definitely wanted them on the Family Values tour.
On the late night shows, they were playing "Greet the Sacred Cow," which
Mm-hmm.
would be like on anybody else's record. That would be like, "What the fuck did you just record?" That would never be heard. But they're playing "Greet the Sacred Cow," you know, like
At Primus, you're like, oh yeah, it's Primus. It's great. Whatever.
oh, that's a pretty accessible one. actually.
Yeah. That's the
That's
hit.
the one to get the mainstream
That's the
attention.
single. How do I get all them low-rise jeans
Now.
moving? All them bedazzled belts. No,
Okay,
yeah,
so we have all these bass players on here, and we all know, based on a couple episodes ago, that we're huge gear nerds. Like, can you do what Les does on basses that aren't Carl
Thompson.
You just
Thompson
did.
basses?
Yeah, I mean,
you did
but
this
I mean,
one.
like, he didn't always use it. He used Defender Jazz for some stuff. He would use
Rickenbacker.
Rickenbackers, his P basses. He would use other things here and there. Like, the Sailing Seas of Cheese was not recorded on a Carl Thompson bass.
No.
Tommy
What
the
was
Cat
it
not
on?
recorded. I can't remember what it's called. But it's a Japanese boutique maker. It's not, if you look on Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, it's the bass he's playing on that because the Rainbow bass hadn't been finished yet.
Really?
But that whole record was not recorded on the Carl Thompson Rainbow bass or anything at all. Pork Soda was. That was the fretted 6-string and the Rainbow bass, and then his regular Carl Thompson, and then a couple others that he randomly has, I think. But yeah, that was something else. But he just sounds like Les. I think no matter what he touches, he's going to sound like Les. He's one of those guys which just
if he picks up a toaster, it's going to still sound like
it's there. It's his hands.
If you pick up any bass, you're not trying to sound like Les's bass. You're just trying to make a bass sound like Les Claypool. And good luck. You have to, if you're going for the fretless sound, maybe pick up a fretless bass and attempt it. But that's kind of all the guidance I can give you.
And that's a good thing to bring up because like it was like maybe 2 years ago when Les was on tour with the Claypool and in Delirium. They stopped in Toronto.
I don't know
And
anything about that at all.
You don't? It's not bad.
Is it not bad?
Yeah. And
All
but they're in Toronto, like he's best buds with Geddy Lee. So he brings Geddy out for a song and they're both playing bass and Geddy's playing like one of those pachyderm basses. So I'm clicking on it. I was like, this is going to sound weird. I was like, oh, it just sounds like Geddy. It's all in the fucking hands.
Nah,
like-
I hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, when Les plays like weird dobro bass, like it sounds kind of weird, but it's like, oh yeah, it's Les Claypool.
Yeah.
It's literally a dobro that's a bass.
Even when he's playing Arco on Mr. Crinkle, it
yeah, when he
still
plays
sounds
upright,
like-
you're like, oh, that's weird upright. What? Oh, it's Les. Yeah.
Oh, it's Les Claypool. Yeah.
Or the
So-
Whamola or something.
Because doesn't he do like a triple string? He's like, brum, bum, 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 bum.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah,
like,
he does
just
the
blast it in.
bounce,
Yeah.
It's
the bow
ridiculous.
bounce, Brum. Where you hit it. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, you do the bounce with it.
Yeah, wrap us up, Jimmy, because I have a good ending part. Wrap us up.
All
Jimmy.
right.
So in summation, with all of this, one of the strangest sensations of all time, musically speaking. Why, how can we sum it up? Junkdrummer, how can you sum up Primus in your mind?
I will sum it up like this. Back in the day when I was teaching high school, I remember coming into the band room, and let's be honest, where the all of our band nerds, and there's 3 of them in here. And that's where the creative outsider freaks hung out, right? And I remember coming in to do like a drumline practice, and there was like a couple kids in the back, and they all had a bass. And three or four of these kids were all trying to play their crappy version of Tommy the Cat. And I was like, as long as your creative, interesting, freakish outsider kids are in the back of the band room trying to play Tommy the Cat, then we're doing okay as a people. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we live in times where if you watch the news, maybe things are, you know, it can feel like things are going south. But as long as those kids are still trying to be creative and not giving a fuck about what's popular at the time and what's going to get you signed and what's going to get you money, we're going to be fine. Because, man, maybe one day one of those kids is going to be on the radio like Les, pushing the movement forward and turning on other musicians. That's what I've always thought. I could remember coming in and remember some kid and be like, it was on things like this he did. I was like, oh yes, this is
He's a good
things are okay. Things are fine because there's bass players out there that want to be like Les Claypool. That's how I would put it.
All right. How about John? How would you feel? How would you sum it up?
A tortured circus that won't get out of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A deeply troubled, tortured circus that makes every moment more anxious than the last. And it's beautiful. I don't know how else to put it.
I think it's happy there.
Yeah.
Adam, how would you describe that?
I feel like the rest of the music world could be either described as like sweet or savory, but then Primus is like the umami.
Ooh, that's nice.
Shit.
That's like a big fucking dose of it, though. it's like eating a spoonful of wasabi.
The most umami I've ever had.
I clearly can sense that, but what the fuck is it?
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I think you the fact that you hear a little bit of them in most everything you hear now, even like if you turn on your TV, and that they pulled from some of the historical weirdos, like Rush were weirdos.
Zappa.
Zappa was the weirdo. Like Beefheart is a fucking weirdo. Yeah, so like it's just like the little sprinkle of weird but amazing. You know.
Give it to us, Jim.
For me, I remember there's a famous Zappa quote that I'm sure other people had said before Zappa, but it's usually attributed to Zappa, where he said, without deviation, there is no normal. And you have to have deviation in order to right yourself in your life, in society, and everything. Like there has to be a deviation or normal doesn't exist. So somebody has to step up and do it. And that's got to be one of the hardest things in anything that anybody could ever do, is to be the deviation, and not only be the deviation, but to succeed in being the deviation, and then to influence things as heavily as they have going forward. It's incredibly punk rock. And even if, say, somebody doesn't like it, I don't know how you can't respect it, because it's so different, so strange, but it just works. And it worked for so many people for whatever reason that it did. And I'm glad that they deviated. Thank you all very much for joining us tonight. We hope that you have deviated from whatever YouTube channels you would normally be watching, and you decided to join us in our deviation. We are the new normal. Please.
Now that's hope for the world.
Yes, please join us here at the new normal, and hope you have a good one. And we'll raise a glass or a can or a bottle to you. To the uncles,
And you
the
all
drunkles.
suck.
You all suck. See
Each
y'all.
and every one of you.
See y'all on the next one at the next time. And bye-bye. 2 times.
Suckiest bunch of sucks that ever sucked.